Hello, and who the duck, mein Freunde? I'm Peter, and here I'm telling you stories about the most interesting European cars of the 80s and 90s. Today we are talking about one of the most unusual and unexpected Volvo cars, Volvo 480, produced from 1986 to 1995. But before we start, I'd like to greet all new subscribers. Welcome to the channel. And I'd like to thank all my subscribers and viewers. Thank you so much for your trust. And if you are not subscribed yet, please hit that red button below to stay tuned for new videos. Thank you very much, my friends, and let's get back to the car. When we speak about Volvo 480, we must keep in mind two other Volvo cars that are directly related to 480 and were the reason why this car was made. The first one is Volvo 340-360, made from 1976 to 1991. This car was actually developed by Dutch automaker DAF, but later Volvo bought the company and produced the car under Volvo brand after some updates and modifications. Most of the cars of the 300 series were produced in the Netherlands, in Born. They were also assembled in Malaysia and Indonesia, but this is out of the scope of the story. Volvo 340 was actually a good car. It was rather modern and capable for its time and featured an unusual CVT transmission and a transaxle arrangement. I used to drive one about 20 years ago. One of my friends had a 343. It wasn't very fast, but the handling was very enjoyable. I even tried to buy one for myself, but the deal didn't go through. Well, there is something mystical in my relationship with the Volvo cars. I tried to buy a Volvo several times in my life, but every time something happened that prevented me from doing this. Maybe someday. The 300 series was rather popular with over 1 million cars sold, but in the 80s it was clear that the car needs an update, and it was developed in the form of Volvo 400 series. And here we come to the second car which is closely related to Volvo 480, Volvo 440. 480 and 440-460 were built on the same platform and shared a lot of mechanical components including the engines. The range of engines for 440-460 was wider, but all engines which were available for 480 were also present in 440-460 models. But despite the mechanical similarities, there is a huge visual difference between 440 and 480. While 440 and 460 were small family cars with the appearance more or less usual for Volvo and for car design fashion of the late 80s, the 480 has an absolutely different look – sportive, unusual and futuristic. Why? Well, at some point marketing managers of Volvo realized that despite the good sales both in Europe and America, Volvo at that time had some kind of weird reputation of boring cars for old people. The boxy look of 240 series, having its origin in 140 series from the middle of the 60s, wasn't very impressive in the 80s. Volvo wanted to attract a younger audience, especially in the United States, and on this field, Volvo had to compete with small Japanese cars such as Honda Civic and with Germans, Volkswagen Golf and Scirocco. So Volvo decided to build a small three-door hatchback or coupe on the basis of the new developing 400 series and make it very unusual. And they did this. Volvo designers created a concept and collected the design proposals from several sources on its basis. There were two designs from the internal Volvo team in Sweden, a proposal from the Italian studio Bertone, and the design made by John de Vries from the Dutch office of Volvo. Eventually, the design of John de Vries was approved for further development with the participation of Rob Koch, Steve Harper, Corian Pompe, Peter Horbury, and other designers of the Dutch and Swedish offices of Volvo. One of the sources of inspiration was the Volvo P1800 ES produced between 1972 and 1974, which I personally consider one of the most beautiful cars ever made. The 480, like 1800 ES, had a large frameless glass trunk cover, the feature which also appeared on Volvo C30 many years later. Volvo 480 was developed with the intention to sell it massively in the United States, and therefore the requirements of the United States National Highway Traffic Safety Administration were considered during the development. This resulted in large plastic bumpers capable to resist 5 miles per hour accidents and pop-up headlights used to comply with headlight height requirements. Unfortunately, this car was never actually sold in America because of the changes in the currency exchange rates, making the car too expensive in the United States. Volvo postponed the start of sales several times and later cancelled it completely. But in Europe the sales were not that bad. The 480 was a rather expensive car, and it was never intended to be sold in millions. Volvo targeted this car, according to the marketing materials, to the buyers, quote, between 25 and 40, probably with a higher than average education and with a career, unquote, meaning the yuppies. At the same time, it wasn't very sportive actually, and it had some issues which I will mention later, so the sales were limited. Nevertheless, over 76,000 cars were sold during the 9 years of production. Volvo did the same trick with the 480 and 440 as Volkswagen did with the first Scirocco and Golf back in 1974. The sales of the low production Scirocco started before the mass production of the Golf, and this allowed engineers to make adjustments to the Golf and remove all issues. By the way, I have a video about Volkswagen Scirocco on this channel. Volvo started sales of the 480 long before the 440 on the same platform. They understood that 480 was going to be sold in much smaller numbers than the family-oriented 440. And this worked. The 440s and 460s are known as rather reliable cars, thanks to the first owners of 480s, who unwillingly helped to find and resolve the imperfections of the platform. During the production time of the 480, it had 3 engines, all taken from French automaker Renault. The first one was a 1.7-liter 4-cylinder engine known as F3N. This engine was also installed in later versions of Renault 9 and Renault 11, which I have a video about. Actually, this was the same 1.7 engine that was used in the previous 300 series of Volvo. The only difference is that F2N engine in the 300 series was carbureted, and the F3N engine in the 400 series had fuel injection. With 108 horsepower of this engine, Volvo 480 at first could reach 190 km per hour or 118 miles per hour and make 0 to 60 miles per hour in 9.5 seconds. But in 1991, due to ecological requirements, the engine was modified. The power was decreased to 102 horsepower, the top speed stayed the same, but the 0 to 60 acceleration lost the whole second and was 10.5 seconds now. The second engine, introduced in 1988, was actually the same one, but with a turbocharger. This engine was modified and tuned by Porsche and could produce 118 horsepower. The cars with this engine were the fastest ones in the line, but the fastest was very relative. The top speed was 200 km per hour or 124 miles per hour, with 0 to 60 in 9 seconds. Honestly, it wasn't very fast for a sportive hot hatch even at that time. There is a legend that Porsche was going to get 160 horses from this engine, but Volvo decided to use a low-pressure turbine, choosing reliability and safety instead of power and dynamics. It's a pity, this car could really use a hot version. In 1992, Volvo started to use a 2-liter naturally aspirated version of the same engine to compensate for the power drop of the 1.7-liter engine. This one had 109 horsepower, a top speed of 190 km per hour or 118 miles per hour and 0 to 60 in 9.9 seconds. All engines could be paired with a 5-speed manual gearbox or a 4-speed automatic transmission. But the 480 never had a Transmatic CVT transmission, available for later models of the 440 and 460. Volvo 480 was a truly international car. It was designed and developed together in Sweden and the Netherlands, taking American regulations into account. It allegedly took some design inspiration from Japanese and Italian cars. It used French engines and suspension developed by Lotus in the UK, and it was produced in the Netherlands. The car was very unusual both outside and inside. It had a very modern look with sharp lines and great aerodynamics. The drag coefficient was 0.32, better than Ferrari Testarossa with its 0.36, and much better than Lamborghini Countach with 0.42. It was the first Volvo without a boxy look for many years. And it was the only Volvo with cool pop-up headlights. By the way, one of the owners said that these headlights have motors from Ferrari and are very expensive to replace if broken. I don't know if this is true or not. If you know, please tell me in the comments. The Volvo's logo was put on a small grille under the front bumper, and this was also inspired by Ferrari. A large frameless glass trunk cover was inspired by Volvo P1800 ES. The rear lights had L shape and were very unusual. The door locks were placed above the door panels because the doors were too thin, and the keyholes were lighted for comfortable opening at night time. At least some of the cars had heated hoods to remove snow and ice, but I'm not sure that this was standard equipment. The quality of painting and rust proofing of the body was very good. The previous generation 300 series had huge problems with rust, but 400 series, and namely the 480, are significantly better. They still can have rust problems under the car sometimes, and it's a good idea to look there if you are buying one. But the rust resistance of the exterior is usually very good, depending on the condition of usage, of course. Inside, the car had even more quirks and features. The rear seats were separated, with an armrest between them, and each of the rear seats had its own adjustments, a big thing in the middle of the 80s. The 480 had a partly electronic instrumental cluster with a trip computer showing a lot of information about the condition of the car and traveling. The modes of the computer were selected by a rotating switch on the central console. High trim levels of the later cars also included automatic climate control. Also, some of the cars had a manually controlled equalizer for the sound system with many small regulators, like on a DJ's audio mixing console. And in general, the car was fully stuffed with sensors and electronic systems. It was almost like a starship for its time. Unfortunately, this number of complicated systems also meant that it was prone to many issues with the electronics. It always happens with advanced systems. But in general, the 480 was a reliable car with not so many problems if kept in good condition. And the later cars of 1992 and younger have fewer issues with the electrics as well. The 480 was never the fastest car on the road. Despite its small weight, around 1000 kilos or 2200 pounds, it felt a little underpowered. Don't get me wrong, it actually is a very funny little car with great handling. It goes through corners very predictably, and it is a driver's car. It kind of really sticks to the road. At the tests, it handled the slalom test and the moose test better than Volkswagen Golf. At the same time, it definitely could use 30-40 additional horsepowers. Volvo wanted this car to be seen as a sports coupe, but it's actually not that sporty. On the bright side, the low-pressure turbine of the fastest engine provides very good, gentle and predictable torque from low revs without any turbo lag common for turbo engines of the 80s. It seems that this car was made more for very comfortable high-speed cruising than for races. An additional bonus of this approach is the fuel economy, 32 miles per gallon, not bad even for today's standards. And it was safe. Of course it was, it is a Volvo. The body had great reinforcements and a safe steering column. It was proven by multiple crash tests. The 480 had an optional ABS since 1987 and driver's airbag since 1994. As a bottom line, it was a good and a very unusual car for its time. It's cool even now. Its dynamics probably didn't meet the expectations conceived by its sportive appearance, but it was a very good handling and fun to drive car anyway. Unfortunately, Volvo 480 was never sold in the United States during its production, despite the fact that this car was developed for America. Actually, none of the Volvo cars of the 300 and 400 series was introduced to the American market, and it's a pity. But the good news is that you can legally import all of them to the United States now, because they are older than 25 years. In Europe you can now buy Volvo 480 for as low as from 2 to 8,000 euros depending on the condition, with some exceptionally good examples with low mileage for 10 to 22,000 euros. I think it is a very reasonable price for such an interesting car. Even with shipping costs to the US, it is still a great price for being an owner of something that unique. Of course, you may find better offers if you search deeper and have someone with good connections in Europe. And by the way, if you'd like to buy Volvo 480 or any Volvo of the 400 or 300 series or any other car from Europe and import it to the United States, I probably can help you with this. Check out our website for all details by the link in the description under this video. Well, thank you very much for watching. If you had an experience with Volvo 480, please tell me in the comments below. It's always so cool to learn real-life impressions from the owners of the cars. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. New interesting stories are coming soon. Heel echt bedankt, mein Vriende, and see you next time.